Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast in partnership with News Radio 600 Kogo. I am Scott Lewis, the CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice of San Diego. And she's the one you see on the vertical video platforms and you think, she's just so charming. She's Bella Ross. Hello, Bella.
Wow, you didn't have to say all that, Scott. We're horizontal now, though.
We are. It's true. But, you know, I can just, there are a lot of like the grandmas and stuff that see you on the Instagram and they're like, oh, this girl's so charming.
Are they telling you that?
Yes.
Oh, that's so nice. Thanks, guys.
And she was that cheerleader in high school. She's Andrea Sanchez Villafaña.
What does that mean?
Just the cheerleader.
That girl.
Yeah.
Boss girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he is the chair of both the San Diego Democratic Party and the Convention Center Corporation. He's our guest this week. He's Will Rodriguez Kennedy. Hello, sir.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Coming up on the show this week, we will obviously be talking to Will about the Democratic Party and how the year coming up is looking. And this week, the San Diego City Council killed a proposal to tax vacation rentals and empty second homes. But the debate about how many homes should be set aside for visitors seems like it will be back. All that and more coming up.
Pero primero, if you appreciate Voice's coverage of the mayor, city hall, and the decisions that affect you, help keep our work going. We're close to fully funding our city hall reporter, Mariana Martinez Barba's position. Support local reporting that keeps you informed and keeps officials accountable by making a donation online at vosd.org/cityhall. Give now, and your gift will be matched by our partner, Report for America. Once again, go to vosd.org/cityhall to have your gift matched and show your support for local accountability journalism. Thanks.
We had a couple come in. Sharon said, I'd like to know what is happening in my hometown. So thank you, Sharon. Got you.
Chi Wu said, I like to read Tigus Lane's reports on North County.
Same.
Makes sense. Me too. Yeah, if you want to join them, please do. Remember to go to vosd.org/cityhall. Mariana's getting her legs under her, and it's going to be fun to watch her get some more scoops. So thank you. Go to vosd.org/cityhall. Well, speaking of the City Hall reporter, Mariana Martinez Barba, she rushed to City Hall the other day and Friday because a bunch of activists had taken over the mayor's office, the lobby. So the mayor's office is on the 11th floor, and there's this little lobby in front of it where there's like security protocols. So they took over that space, and they ordered some burritos, and they hung out, a lot of media. Now, there was sort of like normal media, and then there was like the media of like, oh, look at these crazy people in San Diego, like trying to outrage like what they're willing to do here or whatever. But it got us talking like, obviously, there's tremendous angst and a lot of discussion about what's happening around the country, in Minnesota in particular. There's increased enforcement all around the country with ICE officers and federal agents. But then there also are these sort of roving surges happening in places like Minnesota, Chicago, Charlotte, Maine, where they're taking border patrol far from the border and other sort of alphabet soup of agencies and really raising the level of chaos and just interactions they're having in these streets and causing a backlash. And we are, you know, part of the rest of the world having a conversation about, like, what is our role? What are we thinking? And we had a little bit more of that this weekend. Like, what are we supposed to do? And I don't know that we figured anything out, did we?
I don't think we did. I mean, there's a few things that we are looking into. So we want to look into the number of actual ICE arrests that have happened in San Diego over time and see, you know, has it been really bad in San Diego? Has there been an increase? Has there not been? I think
there's a sense that the surge hasn't hit here yet.
Right. And, you know, I think like in San Diego, so I've had discussions with my mom about this. She's in LA County. And she'll often mention, like, I didn't go to work today because there were so many immigration officers around the neighborhood by my work. And, like, first of all, there's no customers. No one's coming in. It's a Mexican restaurant. The cook's not coming in. Like, the servers aren't coming in. And to her, like, it really shakes her to see, you know, an immigration vehicle like that. But here in San Diego, you see it every day, right? Like, you know, they're stopping at the Ralph's to get some food, or you see them at a restaurant, whatever. We're so used to seeing them here And I don't think we've at least seen the level of enforcement that others have seen in other cities.
Will, you just pulled out your passport. You're walking around with it now.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean, I cross the border every once in a while. I have friends on the other side. I obviously work for a border district, and it's a real reality for anyone who. I'm Puerto Rican. I'm a citizen, always have been, but even I get stopped at the border all the time. So like, we're seeing citizens get detained. And it can affect anyone if you speak Spanish, if you don't look quite American. And so now I carry my passport around.
Yeah, so the county and the San Diego City Council both passed these sort of updated policies on how the police and how their government should interact with ICE agents and such. The activists that took over the mayor's office wanted to go further. It wasn't clear to me exactly what more we could do, but you tried to bone up a little bit, Bella, on what actually exists now as far as policies between. I think the key questions are what happens if something, if there's chaos or violence in San Diego. Are the police protecting San Diegans? Are they protecting the agents? Are they some sort of, blue hat peacekeeping force? What did you figure out?
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I first saw the demands that were posted by the protesters, it felt like it was creating this false dichotomy of, they were basically saying, okay, if SDPD is going to be at the scene of like a federal immigration action, they either need to be there like actively combating ICE, or they should just not be there at all, which I thought was like a really interesting way to look at things. And I didn't really understand it at first, but like thinking about it more and also thinking about it from their perspective seems to be that like by being present at an immigration action, even if it's just in this like peacekeeping capacity of like kind of like diverting traffic and like all these other things like that, seems to them like, being complicit with what ICE is doing and like thus enabling them. But there are like a handful of local regulations and ordinances that kind of attempt to grapple with this. I mean, first of all, we have the California Values Act, SB 54, which is the sanctuary state law that we all know. Then Todd Gloria passed an executive order last summer that went slightly further than SB 54. And then we had the Due Process and Safety Ordinance from the fall, proposed by Shani Rivera's office, that took it even a little bit further. And I feel like in that one was like where I got the closest to getting a clear answer on how SCPD is expected to be involved and when they might cross into a like different legal territory. And it basically said that like they are expected to not intervene at all in these cases, even if they're there as like peace officers. Like they can be there, they just have to like not interact with ICE or like support ICE at all unless there's some kind of like imminent threat to public safety and life. Which seems like still kind of like subjective,
right? Like
seeing what we've seen in Minnesota and like how these scenes play out and how quickly things can go from like being like a protest to being like a murder scene. Like how like those judgment calls I think seem like they would be very difficult to make. And I'm still also trying to figure out, as we're trying to figure out like one, like how many people have been deported by ICE, detained by ICE in San Diego. Also like how often are local law enforcement actually being called out to these scenes?
Yeah, so I think there's sort of two big things that come to my mind. One is like, if you're doing crowd control, I would 100% prefer SDPD doing crowd control of any situation over these like border patrol and stuff like that. They're clearly not doing that well, right? But then the second question is like, I think one of the scariest parts, besides the killing of the observer this last weekend, the scariest part in a way was what happened after that when they tried to secure the scene. Local officials tried to secure the scene, and there was a standoff between them and federal agents. And I think that we have this thing in the world where the state is supposed to be the monopoly on violence. Like they're the only ones that are allowed to carry out violence because they're representing the people, right? But when you have two states with that monopoly of violence and they have a standoff, that's war. That's where we start to get into guns pointed at each other and an actual civil conflict. And I think that's what's really scary is if we get more into that territory where people are demanding that the local guns be pointed at the federal guns, that, obviously can lead to places that are frankly terrifying. And so, when you're demanding that, in a way, it seems like they were almost demanding that happen or that SDPD not be around. And I think both of those are not necessarily consensus ideals, right?
So I've spoken with both sides, and I'm actually friends with, both sides of this specific debate. And what I think, first of all, when you think of use of force matrices, I'm a Marine veteran. Yeah. One of the first things in a use of force matrix is presence. And so when the officers come, what I think people are seeing, one, is that ICE is using them as a barrier to kind of shield what they're doing. So what they see is like, here are the San Diego Police Department, like standing in a barrier, preventing their observer or protesting of ICE, and therefore they are facilitating the ICE action.
Yeah.
There's also been accusations that San Diego police have actually facilitated arrests. I haven't seen that, but there's been that out there, and so but that's what they're saying. Just stay away. But I agree. Like both options are really bad, and then it leads to like a bunch of other questions. Like if we start getting into that, like for example, Donald Trump, says, what, the mayor is resisting an immigration action. When he issues that order to arrest the mayor, does this protective detail defend him? Like whose orders do they follow?
Yeah.
This type of, and we're already seeing that in Minnesota, where they called the National Guard up in order to de-escalate the situation or something. But what exactly are we expecting them to do? We're in a really dangerous place. Like we're just a hair away from civil conflict.
Yeah. Well, I think, we'll continue to monitor. I think that obviously the, quote, sanctuary, I've just tried to make this point for a decade, like the sanctuary name is terrible. Like people were removed all the time from sanctuary cities and states. We're watching the sheriff still comply with, what it's required, what's allowed to be cooperative actions with state law. But in spite of county board policy about what shouldn't happen, and so there's that little standoff happening as well. And, the state law is very clear of violent criminals and such that they do facilitate communication between feds and locals. And I think we're gonna be in a really interesting period over the next few weeks watching that, but we'll be there. And of course, if there's similar surges happening here, we'll track it and hold them accountable.
That's also a big source of misinformation on the right, in that they're thinking that a sanctuary city means that we're not cooperating at all. But I think there's a general consensus among all political spectrums. If there's someone who's convicted of a crime, turn them over. It's time to go.
Yeah.
And they are trying to say that we're not doing that, and they're using that in order to justify their positions on an immigration enforcement overall.
Yeah.
But isn't that what the county policy tried to somewhat accomplish?
Well,
like we're not cooperating at all, but obviously Sheriff Kelly Martinez was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to continue to cooperate in these cases where, these are violent.
Yeah.
criminals.
I mean, I can't get into the mind of what Supervisor Vargas at the time was proposing, but it was also kind of ill-fated. I mean, the sheriff's department gets to decide that type of thing. So I don't think that. I think it was more performative than that.
I'm so curious about because any source reported that Sheriff Kelly Martinez continues to do what is allowed under state law, and from the beginning she said, I'm not going to do this thing that you guys want me to do. And then it's like, okay, so she's still operating the same way that she has been. So what happens? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Are we just like in agreement that she's just going to keep doing that? Or
I think there was talk in some of the follow-ups that they might pursue an updated version, right? Have you heard anything like that?
I haven't heard them put anything to paper, but it's also important, like in the even Shelley Martinez's, Sheriff Martinez's position, like she is saying, as per state law, they are not cooperating on anything but the facilitation of communications of violent criminals.
Right. Well, we will be paying attention and let us know anything you would like to understand better. Well, you whenever there's a big policy debate at the city council, you have to watch Dem on Dem sort of policy battles. It must be a little bit interesting for you and your perspective to try to maintain the peace and the alliance and such. But this week was a good one. The Shanilo Rivera, so he announced at PolitiFest in October and has been pursuing relentlessly since then this policy to add a special tax to vacation rentals and empty second homes, about 11,000 homes. We did a little map of where they are, right? That was kind of cool. Will Huntberry. And so the idea was, look, if the tax is high enough, they'll either decide to put it on the market for rental or for sale, which adds another unit to our housing stock and helps alleviate the crisis. Or if they don't do that, then they pay the city money that will help with the budget crisis. It went to Rules Committee yesterday, and there was a big debate about it. There were a lot of people, hours and hours of testimony as those days go, and it failed. He got another vote, but he did not get another one, and it is done, at least for now. But it was quite a scene. Our Mariana Martinez Barba immediately recognized and talked to people who said they were bussed in.
Yeah, which she had received a tip before that a lot of people who were going to be present there in support of not taxing these second homes, so against Sean's proposal, were maybe possibly paid or something to go to this meeting. So she went in kind of looking, just chatting with people as a reporter does. And sure enough, she talked to a woman who said she had been bused from LA the night before, was put up in a hotel, and was taken to that meeting along with 45 other people. And they were just there to oppose this proposal. And she said she didn't speak, but she had a little sign. They all were wearing these light colored blue shirts. And so Mariana got to talking with a lot of people. One woman had a full itinerary about what they were supposed to do that day and how long they were supposed to stay. Mariana did obtain a message, an Instagram message from someone saying they're looking for some people to come and do some civic activism. So they were going to be paid $25 an hour for 4 hours to just show up and be at this meeting.
Got it. So I got a question. You're a politics guy. What doesn't the cost of us and everybody talking about these paid protesters cost more than the benefit of them holding a sign at city council? Are there any, it's not like the city council's looking at the t-shirts and judging whether they're going to vote either way. I mean, yeah, they get moved sometimes by public comment, but some of them say they didn't even comment. So what are we even doing here? Why would they risk the bad look of paying people to come down for the very minimal, if any, benefit?
So I think what you're seeing is a sign of things to come in terms of the flashpoints moving forward in San Diego. It's going to be a lot of business versus grassroots type stuff. In this case, they don't care. I mean, the cost that they incur to their business if they were to pass this measure, at least as they're saying, it's an existential threat. They're just going to throw money at the problem, and apparently they're going to ship people from LA. This is the flashpoint that's really going to indicate where things are going to be siding in terms of, and it's going to be a source of real strife in the Democratic Party. We'll see it here, and we'll see it in the with the situations with the chamber. This is what it's going to look like over the year.
Yeah.
Well, and I also feel so much of it is about Airbnb and these short-term vacation rental companies just showing how much they're willing to put behind this and how powerful they are. They've been saying this since the beginning. Don't mess with us.
Yeah.
We'll
do everything we have to.
In. Yeah.
We see that in Sacramento too.
But I do have to say, what is so bad about it?
The policy? Or
yeah, if I have an Airbnb and now I got to pay, $8,000 or something. I mean, $8,000 is not nothing, but in theory, you would just pass that on to the people staying in your short-term vacation rental. And in theory, you're probably making a lot more in just a few visits.
Well, they're all probably close to the, I mean, I don't think their profit margins, obviously some of them are loaded and just raking it in. But I think for a lot of people, you spread $8,000 over 12 months. What are you, 500 something? And so that means you got to charge over those weeks $500 more. And that means like when you look at a hotel versus an Airbnb, you as a consumer might start making the choice differently, and it just starts to tumble from there. And so it's not easy for them. That's what they were trying to talk about, is like they're at a tight balance. That kind of twists it. But that's what Sean explicitly wanted them to do. He wants them to see that balance. Right now it's lopsided in favor of vacation rentals, and he wanted it to be lopsided in favor of putting it on the market for actual rentals. And I think like, that was literally what he wanted them to do. And I think he charged it just enough. Like he said, corporate owners would have to pay even $4,000 more, which I think all of them are probably corporate. They probably formed a corporate entity to limit their liability with these rentals. And so it was effectively a $12,000 tax, which again is $1,000 a month, which passing on to your renters is going to be significant, and it would throw that out of whack. And so I think, as he got closer to that, he did try to make the case that this was about housing and not about revenue necessarily, which was a switch. Like he kind of started a few months ago saying like, we need money for the city's services and people should pay for it, to like, to this view. That's fair, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting things that I got from that meeting was this tension, because in the beginning it seemed like it was being pitched as like a best of both worlds, like, oh, we can get more money for the city and free up housing. But then there was a point during the meeting where I believe it was an independent budget analyst had said that if the measure turns half of short-term vacation rentals into homes, the city would be losing more from the TOT tax than it would be making from the added tax revenue. Right.
And really, I think either way, the policy outcome is probably a good one, frankly. The housing is a problem. And really, if what they were trying to do is prove a point. Airbnb does not want us to be coming. They can't sustain this. If we kept on pulling different policies, they're not going to be able to do this every week, or maybe they can. They'll throw money out of it. But two, they don't want to have us constantly nipping at them. So this is a show of force. Now back the hell off. That's what they're saying.
So the debate was fascinating. So here was Sean Elo Rivera making the case for the housing part of it. And he tried to tie it to everybody's conversation about building. We're always talking about building homes, adding supply. And he said he wanted to be consistent with that.
Every time we build a home, we are helping make the problem a little less bad, and doing what we can to try to make it better. And the same applies to a home that is turned from an empty home or short-term vacation rental into a home for a San Diegan.
Yeah, so this gets to the point, I always try to get home, there were a lot of people that got up, and one in particular I'll talk about later, who made the case, even if you got these homes on the market, they're not, normal people can't afford them. Okay, let's just be one time more clear again. Rich people will always find a home. They will always find a home. And if you do not make homes available for them or create them, they will go to a cheaper area and turn it into a rich home, and it'll go all the way down the ladder. That's what happens. So you make a home available in Ocean Beach or in La Jolla, and that has value, even all the way down. And that's part of what he was saying. Now, what came later was really interesting. Raul Campillo, who was always against this, he came out with, I think, the most passionate by far speech that I've heard in favor of short-term vacation rentals from a city council person that I've ever heard. They're usually we should allow them. It's okay. It's, part of our culture or something like that. He was like, no, this is a great and important business. And I think, so now this is long. I'll jump in a couple moments. So
for the vast majority of people, owning a short-term vacation rental, a home that they rent out, it's not a luxury side hustle. It's how they get by. A person who has a long-term rental has very different interests than a person who has a short-term rental. Short-term rental folks are trying to maximize the income. Long-term rentals are trying to reduce the amount of risk by having someone who's there for a whole year. I bet a bunch of people here who have short-term vacation rentals have at one time been long-term rental owners, had a really bad tenant, lost a lot of money in some way, shape, or form, and decided that's not their business model.
So that's an interesting, so we'll keep going in a second, but he's saying there, look, I get it. Like you were burned by some tenant. It makes total sense that you would want to rent out instead to vacationers, which is again, a really straight capitalist approach to these specific units. These are not homes. These are businesses. It makes sense that you wouldn't want a local living in them, which I think is kind of a dark take on renters, right? I don't know. It made me I was just kind of stunned that he would take that approach with it.
I'm not surprised. I mean, look, I like Raul. He's a good guy. He's very smart.
Yeah.
And what I'm finding, with respect to a lot of these Democrats who are starting to look at their next position, they're starting to take these positions where they're going out on a limb in order to stake a position for their next office. And we're seeing that a lot more. And in this case, I think he does want to position himself as the business Democrat. And, that's fine. We're a coalition party. We have business Democrats. We have Democratic Socialists. That's okay. But I think that we have to remember that more than half of the city is renters. And it is kind of offensive to look at it that way, and also to embrace a policy outcome that would make it harder for renters to the benefit of corporate owners. It doesn't seem right. So I just respectfully disagree.
Fascinating.
I think another thing that I thought was so interesting is I can see how that some parts of that argument would resonate with people, but then at some point in the meeting, Elo Rivera said, you know what, maybe we can just focus this on corporations and second homes. And even still, at that point, it failed. And to me, that seemed especially the empty second homes thing seemed really low-hanging fruit. I couldn't imagine that was something that a lot of people there were a hill that they were going to die on. But still, so I mean, why do you think that happened?
There's, I think, two things. One is more cynical, just straight politics, and one is the principle. So I think there is this take that the chamber and others were making, which was look, we spent years, and they spend years trying to figure out how to get a vacation rental ordinance. So there used to be a status of nobody knew what the legal status of vacation rentals was. There was an argument, and I think a rather legitimate one, that they were not allowed under city code. And so they went through this process and said okay, we can cap the vacation rentals at 1% of housing. And they thought that would be a real stringent, containment of the problem. It turns out there was lot they could have a lot more than there existed because of that cap. So there was the 5,000 units or so. And I think they said look, we went through all that. We've tried and failed. We put a cap on it. We put a TOT tax on it. We put a license fee on it. We hired code enforcement officers. We did everything we were supposed to do. They all complied. And now you're throwing another one at them. They built businesses based on that assumption. And now you're throwing a new thing at them. What are we doing? You can't just keep, jacking them around like that, which I think is, a rather legitimate point. The second thing that happened, though, is the right is organizing a lot better in San Diego than it was just a year or two ago. The chamber is more mobilized and more effective than it was before. The Lincoln Club is trying to get there. The the BIA is trying to get there. The right went through 10 years of just complete lost in the desert, have no foothold in San Diego, and now they're back, not in the form of the Republican Party, because they've still given up on electoral politics, but in the form of these sort of side voices. And they mobilize. The chamber, I don't know that if this comes up a year ago, that it loses. It came up now, and it lost in part because of that sort of organization.
That's exactly right. This is basically their attempt to revive something like the Republican Party so that they can contest in the political sphere. But I would like to point out, like, the people that they have hired to do this are some of the people who are tied to the problems that we have always had. I mean, Kevin Faulkner's leading the Lincoln Club. Chris Kate is leading the chamber. I mean, these are people who are intrinsically tied to all the policy problems that we have not solved as a city. And it's smart of them to hire people who are electoral winners to try and do this, but I think they're misreading the moment because they're joining this sort of rightward turn as the country is turning to the left. And so, yeah, the Democratic sort of side is now trying to refocus, because for a while, when we came to power, we were sharing power with the chamber. Labor was working with the chamber. There was a lot of there was like a lot of like synergy happening. I don't think that's starting to break down. And so the left is now starting to refocus and soon will reengage.
I think the other thing that happened politically is that Shaniel Rivera tried, but I think maybe a little late and maybe not effectively, to really connect with the people who were upset about vacation rentals from years and years ago. And usually people who have opposed him in different settings, right? And I think it was awkward for both sides to like kind of feel this out, like, hey, we're on the, like, let's be fired up together. And I don't think they quite coalesced the way that could have been really powerful. Like there was all these neighborhoods are for neighbors. Remember those signs? Like, those people, I think there was a feeling from them. Some of them showed up at council, but there wasn't like the swell that there was during the vacation rental battles. And I think that for whatever reason, he wasn't able to tap into that. And that would have been the only sort of force that could have overcome what happened, I think, at the council.
You mean these are groups that he has in the past clashed with over, wanting to bring denser housing into some of their neighborhoods?
Yeah, denser housing, taxes, different,
right.
Trash tax, stuff like that he's seen as part of the wrong side of. But I think this was like this, he's been trying to like lay out this San Diegans against the world feeling. And like, he had a like big golden door to walk through to do that with this one, and it just didn't quite happen. At the end, he started showing up at neighborhoods and other things to try to rile it up, and it wasn't quite there yet.
There's also a political thread that's tied into this, and that is the sales tax initiative that they're trying to put forward.
Yeah.
One of the things the theories that have been sort of thrown out there is that if this goes on the ballot, Airbnb will throw $5 million, and then they'll just say all tax is bad. And then if this doesn't go on the ballot, perhaps they will contribute towards a unified approach towards raising the sales tax, which is because there is general consensus that the city needs some sort of revenue.
Yeah, 100%. They were explicit about that. They quoted to me like, "Hey, we can be foes or friends." And so now they got what they wanted out of this one. One of the people that stood up opposed, and it was Kelvin Barrios. He was the leader of the laborers union. He got up and spoke and said, "This is the wrong thing to do." And he used that point. He said, like, this doesn't create any housing that normal people can afford. And we should, and then he said something I think is really interesting. He said, we should use money to build stuff. Like, new money coming into the city should be reserved to build stuff, infrastructure. And that's what we do, and that's why we support, where we oppose this. Now, they are also, of course, the main proponents of a half-cent sales tax that looks like they're now set to put on the ballot. They wanted this to go down so that they could put this one forward. And I think it'll be really interesting because on the one hand, now it calls the bluff from Airbnb. Okay,
right.
Are you ready? Like,
are you going to be a friend?
Yeah.
Let's see you, girl.
The thing about that, though, is like, I would never, if I were in charge of this, I would never yield on the sales or the Airbnb tax until I saw something from them.
Yeah.
Because these are cutthroat business people. And like, why we have no leverage with them right now.
Yeah.
But Kelvin is also my former roommate, by the way, is also one of the smart people in the background who's putting together the revenue. And like there are these political dynamics. To talk about the sort of Sean Elo not or Councilmember Ela Rivera not able to like coalesce a faction. There's a really human sort of reality here where the personalities kind of like trip people up in almost all of our political things. And I deal with it all the time in the Democratic Party, where, especially on this Democratic Council, where it's not just an ideological divide, it's a personal divide among the council members.
So do you think that widened?
I think it just didn't help. Like you kind of need things to like go your way. You need a little bit of luck. You need a little bit of goodwill, and you need to not like make too many enemies. And he did not mass all of that. He didn't line all that up.
Yeah, Shawnee Rivera got to be council president, in large part because of Chris Cate, and they had an alliance and a sort of friendship and allyship for a while. Now Chris Cate is in charge of the chamber, and the animosity between those two and what they're both doing, I think, has risen to the point where that old sort of like, cooperation might be completely shattered. I'm not sure, but
I mean that was the really Chris Cate flipped because Dr. Jen told him that he was not going to be budget chair, and he didn't get what he wanted, so he ran and created a new council president. I mean, it was as simple as that. So I don't think there was a deep affection there. I think former Councilmember Cate is very strategic, and he is doing very strategic things. He is a smart player.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this might not go away, so I wanted to highlight. So one of the votes to watch yesterday was Kent Lee, city council member. He, I think, had indicated he was against it, but he was part of the group that made it go forward to this point. And so it was going to be very interesting to see like what he decided, what he said. And he basically said, like, I am opposed to this because the outcomes aren't clear. We might hurt our bottom line. And then people cheered, and he stopped him and said this.
Finally, I just want to note that my position on this specific measure does not take away from my belief that short-term rentals do have an impact on local housing. And I look forward to continuing the critical discussions necessary to address housing capacity, housing stock, and housing affordability on that front.
I mean, it sounds like this isn't going away, but what could they do next? Like, do you think they'll come back with something like this, or
they might refocus on his second approach and pitch that as the main idea?
The corporate and empty homes.
I mean, because that's like, if we're really talking about like political messaging, like Airbnbs can sometimes be bad neighbors. It does take away from the housing stock. It's not like as much as some people want to say, but it's something.
Yeah.
And the corporate ownership thing, like, I ideologically have a problem with the idea of corporations owning multiple properties and then taking that housing stock away from people when we're in a housing crisis. We have to act like we're in a crisis or not, and that means we have to approach. And so what I've heard a lot from some city leaders is that, well, this doesn't solve all the problem, but okay. Throw all the things that don't solve all the problems, and we'll at least get somewhere. And so I see that a lot, but we're going to see this back. I think the corporate sort of the wealthy versus the people thing is going to be a thing for this year.
So you have to balance. So let's talk about you real quick. So you're the chair of the Democratic Party. We just had. Well, let's do this. You were the chair.
Yes.
And then you abruptly weren't, and now you are again.
Right.
What do you tell people about what happened? How do you explain it?
I say that there was a brief interruption in my service. There was a little bit of a misunderstanding. There was also a political sort of thing. I had made some enemies, and they tried to take me down. And luckily, the person who was involved had a lot of bravery and decided to make it right, issue a clarifying statement, and now I'm back.
Got it. So now you're in a situation like this. Like you said, like you were kind of hostile or supportive of this policy, but you got to manage all these different personalities. You're all under the tent together. There is going to be a mayoral election. There were two potential candidates in this argument, Shawnee Rivera and Raul Campillo. How does that look going forward? Do you have any insight about who's going to be putting their hat in that ring?
I don't want to talk about it, but no, I'm kidding. Look, I think that it's probably going to be Scott Peters, but who is my current boss. But that will happen in my next term. So it's like it's hard for me to see a world after 2026 because there's so much on the line. That being said, it is what I mean. There's a lot, because especially since Congressman Peters was running for re-election. He hasn't announced for mayor yet. Like people have to position themselves. They can't just wait on each other. So they're going to make their positioning right now. If for example Congressman Peters wasn't in the mayor's race, we're going to see a sort of business framing candidate with Raul and sort of a populist kind of candidate with Councilmember Campillo, and also a populist candidate with Councilmember Elo Rivera, and then there'll probably be like 50 other candidates. So it is going to be a constant thing of seeing like how people frame, and you're going to also see like the factions kind of lay out now that there are like former right-wing politicians in charge of these institutions. Like there's not as much want by labor or by people on the left to work with them in the same way, and we're seeing that sort of break away. If you want to ask me about Geo Group, we'll talk about it later. But
yeah, we can get into that. Let's talk. So one of the personalities that sounds like he will get involved, and this you had mentioned like, look, I'm focused on national, on winning Congress and stuff like that. But you might have to focus locally. Richard Bailey, the former mayor of Coronado, sounds like he's pretty close to announcing his run for city council. He might leave the Republican Party. It seems like to do that. Do you foresee a big battle in District 2? Dr. Jen currently represents that seat. She won it by painting the opponent or the at that time incumbent city councilwoman as a really connected to Donald Trump, and seems like that playbook would still be around. But Bailey's done a lot to get some Instagram follows, at least.
Yeah, I mean, he sounds like he's acting like a candidate, and he's a credible candidate. I mean, we'll have to look at his record, and leading Coronado is not the same as being in San Diego, and it's kind of, the reality is that we're going to contest that race. We're going to be strong. We are the Democratic Party. This is a Democratic year, but he is not someone to like just
brush off.
Right.
Well, so your big focus, I guess, is District 48, right? Congressional?
It's 48, but it's also regional.
Okay.
Like the drama of the city of San Diego is kind of like a distraction oftentimes. Previously, it was my focus. Like when last time I talked to Voice of San Diego, it was like Sandag, and San Diego was a critical part of that. Now it's like there's areas in the north and the east, which there are areas in the north and the east which are like that are opportunities to expand and create more equitable governing situations out there, and one of them, particularly in the north, or a couple of them in the north, are in that 48th congressional district. So yeah, it is the 48th. It is Escondido. It is San Marcos. It's La Mesa. We've done a pretty good job on, but it might be El Cajon. We'll have to see.
So what's going to happen in the 48th? We got Amar Campanellar, we got Marnie von Wilpert. Darrell Issa is still in the race. There was a lot of predictions he'd get out. It seems like the more time that goes by, the less likely that is going to be. But what is your read on it?
I think he got his orders from President Trump, and he's going to stay in. And that is actually a good thing for us, because if there would have been an open Republican primary, and let's say there were only two candidates, there would have been a situation where we may have in the governor's race where the Democrats could have gotten shut out of the general election in the primary. So now there's only one Republican.
Let me just explain what you're saying. I think that's a great point. Mm-hmm. So if Issa had left and two prominent Republicans got in, like Jim Desmond and Carl DeMaio or something, right, then they might get first and second in the primary, and thus no Democrat even gets into the runoff. Right.
That's a crisis point for me. That's when you have me like telling other people get out of the race.
Right.
But we don't have that. So a Democrat's going to win. I don't know who that Democrat's going to be, to be honest. I think we'd be fools to write off Marnie von Wilpert. We would be fools to write off Amar Campanellar, who has a really like sort of activated base. There's Brandon Riker up in the northern part of the district, and that's kind of new territory for the people who are not Democrats. We have an open elected official, Karina Contreras, who's in it. So like, don't know. I think it's probably not good for the San Diego candidates that there are multiple San Diego candidates kind of splitting the vote. And what I'm really watching is whether or not the sort of, there's like an anti-San Diego feeling that I'm hearing in like North County and East County, particularly when you think about like water and you think about like some of the regional things. There's like a lot of animus for the city of San Diego. And so some of the like sort of hostile politics that we're seeing in the city is kind of bleeding off into different parts of the county. I'm really interested to see if that affects Councilmember Von Wilpert. Now, she's done a really good job of like trying to be like to like make decisions that make sense practically for her. And she is I love her as a candidate. She's a great candidate. She's very disciplined. She knows what she's doing. But I'm watching that as like a case study.
Help me understand something. So the California Democratic Party almost endorsed her. Yes. Like they were like a vote away or something from endorsing her. Does that affect the local one? Does that trump it? Does that set it?
Yes. So luckily, I do not have to decide on this. And I don't have a vote in it. So
because it crosses county lines or something?
Right. And so as a result of that, I am being as neutral as possible.
Got it.
Because my job is to kind of set the ground for whoever the Democratic nominee is. And so my work, and the more neutral and hands-off I am, the more I could be trusted to put together the coalition afterwards. Because what happens in these tough primaries, people get angry at each other, they don't talk to each other, and if you're partisan to that, you can't pull the coalition together. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Huh.
Well, speaking of tough primaries, how are you thinking about the governor's race?
People need to get out. We just got another one. We just got another person jump in this morning with the mayor of San Jose, which actually might be a compelling candidate. I don't know. But at this point, if there is any possibility that two Republicans can get out of the general, people need to get out. That's it. Like the Rusty
names.
If you're under, I don't know. I have to look at the latest poll, but I think like 8%. Get out.
I think what's interesting about that is like one of the people, Tom Steyer, for example, billionaire, like this guy has. It's one thing for people like it is just such an audacious thing to like say like I'm going to run for governor of California. Like you have to be like out of your mind confident.
Yeah.
Like you have to be like, not only can I cover this state which like 40 million people, and like you need what $100 million at least to compete, and you have to be like compelling. You have to be like a Schwarzenegger level like personality. And to just like start your campaign, like the mayor of San Jose, which prominent person, no doubt. He's prominent in these discussions like Voice San Diego has, because he's like, we should crack down on homelessness more and we should be more fiscally, prudent or whatever. But like, how do you pierce through? Like to think you can take that on, that you are the guy that can raise those millions of dollars and do it. It's just fascinating. So once you've decided you're that guy, convincing you that you're not is like, I don't know if you can do it. You cannot convince Tom Steyer that he can't win that.
Well, you can't convince a billionaire of anything.
Yeah.
I mean, they do what the hell they want. But there are political realities, and these people do have a sense of they want to do the right thing. They want to do good for for California, and they can't possibly think that these two Republicans specifically would be good for our state. And so, at some point, someone, our state party chair, Rusty Hicks, maybe should, and our state leadership and the current governor should say, "Hey, you don't have the votes." Like Hamilton, the song, you don't have the votes, get out. Choose other things to serve. There are a bunch of offices. Board of Equalization is still a thing.
Because that's super sexy.
I mean, I don't think it should exist, but okay, but it's still a thing. This is, we have to play for all the marbles, and we can't have this like, our egos. This is a thing constant in candidate politics. The ego thing, people need to check that, and sometimes it does fall on party leadership to do it.
Who does have the juice to tell Tom Steyer? Is it literally Governor Newsom?
You would need to line up the governor, the Senate President Pro Tem, the Speaker, the leader of the party, and then maybe 3 of his billionaire friends. And if you did that, maybe. But also, he has a strong sense of civic pride. I mean, he's doing this because he wants to save the country or something. So I think he's probably one of the more reasonable of the candidates. There are other candidates, obviously, who don't have a chance. Get out.
Yeah.
This sounds like a little intervention. You just walk in a room and Newsom's sitting there. All these other people are sitting there. We need to talk.
Yes.
Your ego is just, you had this on your vision board. Take it out.
It's over now.
It's over now.
You said earlier that nationally we're moving to the left, and I could surely see how if there was a year for some kind of blue wave, it would be this year. But I'm wondering like how you came to that conclusion, and I also have to ask about like Zoran and if that's like informing how you're thinking about this coming year.
So I'm a New Yorker, and I was born in AOC's district, so I am more of a Democrat of that spectrum. Personally, I think what I am seeing with it's not even just like a move to the left. I feel like people are fed up with all the things that they have been dealing with in general. Zoran. So I am from New York. In New York, I am more of a Democrat from that spectrum. I was a Bernie Sanders delegate when I in the last election. I think what we're seeing is that people are fed up with a lot of things, with the status quo, with how much things cost, with the fact that there are these problems that keep on persisting and there are no solutions in sight. And what I'm seeing, and what's interesting when I think about this analysis, is like in the Bronx, the AOC Trump crossover, right? Where you have people who are voting for AOC but also voting for Trump. And what that tells me is that people, they really don't care what the ideology is. They just want someone who's going to do something finally. And if that means smashing the wheel, then go ahead and smash the wheel. And so it is a leftward change. I mean, people are seeing what's happening and they're not liking it and they are moving, but they're not they're not completely embracing one thing or another. What they want is people to take big swings and actually solve problems and stop making excuses. And what I've found a lot of times is that we are constantly excusing a lot of different things. And some of them are reasonable, and sometimes it's an explanation, but the people are hearing them as excuses. And there are these problems, even locally, that are happening. And all we're hearing is like, oh, well, you've had 5 years to solve this Democratic majority or Mayor Gloria. What was the problem? And the answer is, it's harder or whatever. People are done with excuses. They want Democrats and people in general to take big swings. And so now is the era of taking big swings.
I think that's really interesting. I've had a recent experience where like a big state policy, I actually like felt like, you feel some things like paper bags, like obviously a law changes and your lifestyle is affected. And I think those moments are really interesting to track because I think there's so many policies and changes that you don't actually feel, right? So like in the city's suffering right now because so many of the things they've done recently, you feel like Balboa Park parking, parking fines in general, trash fees. Like you just like there's a policy that happens and you suddenly feel it. But especially on some of these big problems like housing or the economy, like a lot of the policies you never actually feel. And so maybe in the macro way, it eventually comes down to you, but you don't realize that. And so your perspective on politics is limited to those specific things you feel and what people say they can do to change them. And I think that they're all the candidates are being judged now on did they make me feel something? Like Faulkner still is remembered as the guy who banned booze at the beach, that affected somebody's life. And I think, and then like what they say they can do, like we'll give you free childcare or whatever. And I don't know. I think there's something similar playing out in South Bay right now, right? Like they wanted to see something happen. They not only didn't show up for Kamala, but seemed like they showed up for Trump. And now it looks and feels like they might be going a different direction in a lot of these South Bay cities. There's 4 Republicans or independents leading South Bay cities. And I wonder if because now they can feel some of the ICE and immigration enforcement impacts and other things, if that feeling is now going to translate into difference. But I think about that a lot. Like, I don't know that they feel that politicians are quite aware of what they're making people feel and whether that's actually like good in their political view.
Right. And in order to like change how people feel, you really do have to take a big swing at it. And what we saw in the supervisor election, for example, Paloma Aguirre is a big swing type elected official. She was taking a big swing at the Tijuana River Valley. She was focused on it, and she's moving forward on it. She is that sort of framing of individual, and you know, I think another thing about the Airbnb thing is like, you know, that's a swing, but it's not a big swing, right? We need a big swing in order to take to all the problems. Like, people need to get out from this like bubble of, I don't know if it's consultants or government relations people, but there seems to be like a bubble in like what the politicians are hearing and what the people are feeling. And a lot of elections is about what people are feeling and how and the sense of urgency it is to get them to feel that there are good things happening.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts on Chula Vista, though, because, you know, Mayor John McCann, he's going to run for re-election. It doesn't seem that there's any prominent person running against him at this current moment. Like, what's your thought on that? I've always thought it so fascinating.
So that is kind of what I'm talking about. Like, none of the council members want to take a big swing at him.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that we could probably beat him with like a nobody. That city is ripe for a Democratic mayor. Now, what's also important is that his office is not quite as important with a Democratic majority. Like, he's not driving the policy agenda there. It's the Democratic majority. So Chula Vista is on the come up right now. I mean, they just opened a major convention center and hotel resort space. I mean, that area is activating, and it's Democratic majorities that have been making that happen. And, you know, he's been the mayor, so he can take some credit, and he's been on those councils. But I think the focus on him is kind of the reason it's like not a big prize is because they're already running the show, and it's kind of a risk. But I need people to take risks. I need my Democrats to take risks.
So all this talk about big swings, are there any obvious big swings that you would like to see locally?
To be honest, like, I am of the mind that we need to really shatter the order of this corporate sort of business perspective in the city. And if I were to take a big swing, I think what might need to happen is, like, rather than piecemeal all these like different solutions, like, we probably should have just put them all like out there in like at a quicker rate, because what's happening is that we're taking unpopular policy at a time. So like, in their individual like approaches, they're not big swings, but if you were to throw them all like towards the people and let them vote on it, right? Like, let's say, okay, let's throw the Airbnb tax. Let's throw this, let's throw a menu of options that let the people decide. Someone's going to make this decision for us. I don't know that I have a specific policy for like what to do. Like, the things that I'm like, in terms of housing, we should have, like, I'm a child of NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority. We should be doing some sort of social housing. Like, we haven't done any of that. That big swing was killed because they needed room for a revenue measure or something. I just think we should have thrown it all at the same time. We're taking a bunch of little swings when we should have been taking there's no agenda.
Yeah, that's classic San Diego. Like, they always, you know, homeless shelters, they're doing one controversial one, they're doing another controversial one, and they get like picked off. But if there was a whole plan for the whole city, you know, as this is one stool of the leg, one leg of the stool, like that is a much different perspective. But I think, like, I'm part of what Shanilo Rivera threw back at his colleagues. He's like, look, you guys keep shooting down things that we're trying to do to solve this problem, but you can't just keep opposing solutions to the budget problem and not offer your own. I think that was directly an attack on Raul Campillo. Like, you supported all these services that you wanted paid for in the budget, but you opposed the trash fee, you opposed this tax. Like, what do you want? And I think that there has to be like a consensus that you even need a solution before you get there. But I'm curious now about one thing. I can't leave you without this. We've been talking about Wonder Woman and her perspective on the San Diego Convention Center. You are the chair now of the San Diego Convention Center Corporation, the nonprofit that oversees the quasi-independent convention center and the facility. You just got a commitment from the mayor and to put $20 million into some modernization efforts and fix some things there. You insist to me that a convention center expansion is still on the table for the future. So I don't think it is, but prove me wrong.
Well, it's okay. The reason this is such a problem is because there's a stupid lawsuit that I'm not involved in where they can't talk about anything that has to do with a specific site.
Yeah.
And so my disagreement here is like, okay, then fine, let's just talk about other sites. Like, let's just talk about it. There is going to be an expansion because it would be a disaster and a betrayal of the public if we didn't do it. And I know for a fact that well, first of all, you can't do it without these four projects. We're talking about the roof. You can't have an expansion if your roof is caves in because of the water. We're talking about the central plant. You can't have an expansion if you don't upgrade our electrical infrastructure. So these are projects that are building into the possibility for an expansion. If you don't do these projects, then first of all, they're super expensive to as you keep on pushing them back. They're super expensive, and then they become the focus of. Then you get into a scenario where we can't have an expansion. So we're doing the work to make sure that we do the projects we need to do, the four major projects that we need, so that when if you don't have your chiller, if you don't have your central plant, if you don't have your roof, you can't do anything with the box that you're trying to build here. So we are building for that. The fact that this lawsuit is preventing people from talking about it, I understand why it's creating. It's really frustrating. There are probably too many attorneys involved in this, but there will be an expansion. I'm positive.
So what he's talking about is the Fifth Avenue landing behind the convention center. There's a plot of land. It used to be like a dredging operation. The guys who control that lease with the port have long proposed, whether sincerely or not, to build a hotel there. The convention center and the city have struggled for years to secure that lease from them, to settle, to make agreements or whatever. So they're holding on to the promise that the city made that they won't expand the convention center or plan on it until the end of a 5-year period, which ends next year. And my response to that is Donald Trump has a lot of bad things, but I don't think he would stop from saying, just do it. Like, yeah, we're going to build this big thing. Sue me. These guys are holding us back from progress. I don't know. Like there's like a way of like throwing some things around to get something done. And I think it's really interesting to me that the mayor and everybody's so afraid of saying something about what they want to see happen there. And I think it's more than just the settlement that's holding them back. I think they aren't sure that they want the expansion that was envisioned for years or can afford it.
Well, the envisioned expansion, I mean, who knows? I mean, that has to, a lot more work has to be done there, but something's going to happen. This building's going to be bigger. Where that is the big question mark. How big it is, whether or not there's something on top of it because they need more revenue. I mean, there's all sorts of options that people can talk about. They just can't do it in the open because of this dang lawsuit.
Got it.
So I'm very confident that something is going to be built, that something's going to be bigger. One, we need it in terms of like the tourism economy. The convention center is kind of maxed out. There's an opportunity there to bring in more revenue, and also be cool, like to just have something cooler there. I know that people want to do it. Right now, we're working on modernization, and that modernization is directly relevant to whether or not you can or cannot expand. So we're doing the phase 0 type work.
Got it. Well, I forgot to remind you of this, but a lot of our guests, or all of our guests, try to come with a hot take. Do you have a hot take, or do you want to?
Sure. We really need to rethink like how we're treating the elected officials and like other people who are leading the city. There has been there's been an assassination of a Democratic elected official in Minnesota. Oh, it was Minnesota. There's been the one of the Democrats in Max Frost was assaulted in Sundance. We just saw what happened with Ilhan Omar. It also was really cool that she squared up against that guy. I thought that was kind of cool. There is a lot of the lack of grace that's being, this is not really a hot take, but it's more of a cool take actually. But there's a lack of grace that's been approached towards our elected officials. And I think it's really important as we cover stories, as we tell stories, that we are really conscious of our words, because we are on a path that I'm really scared about. We could be pushing this country towards civil conflict. And so it's important that when we do things, when we talk about politics, that I'm trying to measure my words. I haven't called anybody any fascists or Nazis or anything like that, although Geo Group is a company that profits on basically slavery. But so Chamber, you should let them go. Actually, that's a hot take. Chamber should let go of Geo Group. But we really need to talk about, we need to figure out how we can have these conversations without creating worse distrust of the government or of these individuals, because they're really humans, right? And a lot of these conflicts, I'll tell you, one of the things I say all the time is, Occam's razor is all things being equal, the simplest explanation is typically the truest. What I found in San Diego politics, all things being equal, the dumbest explanation is typically the truest. If you have to choose between corruption and someone missing a form or something making some sort of stupid mistake, it's almost always the stupid mistake. And I feel like there's an addiction in our ecosystem to assume some sort of conspiracy, and we just don't have those types of masterminds here in San Diego.
Well, let me give some context to what you talked about, and we can just wrap for a second. So the Chamber of Commerce recently posted a help wanted ad or a job opening opportunity on behalf of Geo Group. They're a private company that runs some of these detention centers and associated with ICE. The call started forming in labor circles, and Shani Rivera saying how dare the chamber sort of endorse this for-profit detention center corporation involved in all these controversial things. And then now there's been sort of a cascade of things. Venus Molina's running for city council. She posted a big thing saying, I don't want the chamber's endorsement now because of this. And it seems to be adding up to a little bit of a crisis for the chamber. Now, they throw back and said that just a couple of years ago, the unions were encouraging us to support, the union jobs at this facility. So that's the sort of what you're talking about, that it's crossed the line. Now it's just verboten.
Look, times have changed. We are seeing horrible things on the national stage. We just saw someone get executed by ICE, or actually it's CBP, frankly.
Right.
It's the Customs and Border Patrol. We saw ICE shoot other people, but CBP. And so the chamber has made a misstep in this. And here's my thing, is I'm not quite okay, let's just throw out the chamber, right? Although it does kind of feel like they're doing that to us. If you're going to make this line, then we're going to make this line. And the line is, this company profits on ICE detention facilities, and if they're trying to pay people $1 a day, and if you don't do the work, you don't get to call your family, because you need to have money on your books in order to call your family. That to me is not a work situation where they're choosing to do it. That's something where they're being manipulated into work. That's indentured servitude at best, but it's certainly human misery. And so I'm telling the chamber, let's be part of a community sort of thing where we all have nothing to lose to be against what's happening on the national level. They don't have anything to lose. We don't have anything to lose. If we could all just say, look, this is not okay, and then drop it, and then we'll move on, and fight's over. But if not, this is going to be this is going to be another one of the flashpoints in the conflict that's happening today. So I have friends who work for the chamber. I know some of them. I'm open to talk, but I really think that they made a mistake here.
Will Rodriguez-Kennedy, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast, the most popular public affairs podcast recorded in the disputed territory between Cortez Hill and Greater Little Italy. We are the most popular public affairs podcast recorded for now in that disputed land. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice of San Diego. Bella Ross is our social media producer. Andrea Sanchez Villafana is our managing editor. And Matt Scraby is the producer of this show. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.